Anybody in the Raleigh area? So I'll be going to All Things Open. Actually tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to Raleigh. I get there Sunday. I'll be at this conference called All Things Open. So Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Looks to be a gay old time in the non-homosexual way of being gay. Looks to be good. Starts at like 8 or 9 in the morning. Goes till 7 o'clock at night. They've got socializing, they've got classes, they've got all kinds of stuff going on. So I'm going to go there so I can schmooze. So I can schmooze with tech people and either create a pipeline to Asheville or a lifeline to get the hell out of Asheville if everything kind of goes to hell. Which is where my bet is. I mean, if I'm gonna have to say where my bet is, I think it's going to get bad for Asheville. Don't worry, everybody. Asheville's going to be like New Orleans after Katrina. New Orleans came back. Well, yeah, if you ignore the 110,000 black people who left New Orleans came back. That's what I love. That's what I love about the modern world. If you ignore the people that you didn't want to see anyway, and just focus on the people that you want to see, then yeah, everything's great. Hey, look, well-off white people are doing better in New Orleans. Obviously, it went well. Like, ooh. Anywho. 2:06. All right. Well, guess we'll start the class. Or I guess I'll start meandering to get to the class. Just so you know, if I seem a little bit harebrained nowadays, we did have a biblical flood here in Asheville, North Carolina. And although I question the terminology biblical, let's just say it was a hell of a flood. Basically, this portion of western North Carolina, more or less, got destroyed. We still don't have water. It's been 4 weeks after the hurricane, and literally I have to bucket bathe with lukewarm mud water after my runs in the morning. There is nothing like getting done with a nice refreshing run in the morning and then going into your bathtub with a little pot of lukewarm water and sponging yourself off. That's what we're currently dealing with. When will we get normal water? Who knows? They gave up even trying to tell us when that was going to happen. So anyways, if I seem a little hectic, all that kind of stuff, again, dealing with a lot of what happens when your little chunk of society goes through a biblical flood. But anyways, I'm here trying to do this stuff and do these types of classes. Again, anybody that's new here, these are all beta classes. Basically with Silicon Dojo, the idea is it's not just the class itself, but it's the that I'm teaching you. But it's also the material for the classes, how all this stuff is done, so that this can be replicated by other people. Basically everything that I'm doing here is essentially open for you folks to use. You can take all the material that's sitting there on GitHub, and you can use it as you see fit, even commercially, right? You could go to New York City, and run a class for $100,000 using my material. And God bless you if you get people to show up. Right, I have no copyright there. So that's what's going on. One of the things, again, for material and all that, if you need additional material, these videos or these classes are being recorded in a camera that's right over here in 4K. Those do go up to the YouTube channel, the Eli the Computer Guy YouTube channel, and are generally up either the same day or the day after I do these classes. One of the nice things with the 4K is so Zoom uses a 1080p codec, encoding codec. That's pretty crappy. Like, it's 1080p, but it's pretty garbage. So one of the things that I'll tell you is if you want to watch material later, if you go and you watch the 4K version of these classes, you can actually see things. Like in 4K, you can literally read these tabs if you zoom in. Where on Zoom, that's just not going to happen. Again, everything here is on GitHub, Silicon Dojo, GitHub Silicon Dojo, online classes, and if you want to connect with me, connect with my LinkedIn profile that exists, so you know there's stuff that's going on. In-person classes are coming back, so even before the flood I decided I didn't want to do in-person classes. They will be coming back to Asheville. Some classes will most likely be in November, and then one of the things I'm trying to do is also do in-person classes in Raleigh. Again, try to create a pipeline between Asheville and Raleigh, and those will be coming God knows when. We do have the additional meetup for if you are in the Asheville area or can become part of the Asheville area, Silicon Dojo hyphen Asheville edition, that is there. Donor box, again, these are free to the end user classes. It doesn't mean that they're free. Crap costs money. Me going to all things open costs money. So if you find value in these classes, and you have a couple of dollars in your pocket, there's a donor box link. I don't know, somewhere around here. I do got to get better with advertising that. But anyways, there's a donor box link somewhere. Click on that. Throw in how much you think this class is worth, and it'll keep these damn things going. And finally, if you have a question, make sure to raise your hand in Zoom, as I cannot see it if you don't. Zoom, raise your hand, right? Because again, some people go like, and I can't see that. And then finally, again, if I didn't say it this time, again, I will be at All Things Open in Raleigh. That's a conference in Raleigh. Be there, get there tomorrow night, and I'll be there through Tuesday. So if you're going through, looks like you're done talking. What the fuck? Oh, Zoom. Zoom's screwing with me. Anyways, if you're in the Raleigh area, if you're going to All Things Open, I will be there. If you're in the Raleigh area, you might take a look at that conference. It actually looks pretty good. So with that, are you ready? I don't know if I'm ready. Oh my God. Oh, there is nothing like a biblical disaster just to screw with your brain. But anyways, you guys got to push the ball forward. You got to push the ball forward. It's okay to cry. For all those people out there, I just want you to know, it's okay for a man to cry. It's okay for a man to go into a corner and dry heave. After the work is done, you can bawl your eyes out as you're driving to the dump to throw everything into the dump. Important thing is that you keep working. Anywho, so we're going to be talking about bottle today. And actually, this class is going to be relevant for most of the web app frameworks with Python. Again, one of the problems that we run into in the modern world of technology is there are so many ways to skin a cat. Again, back when I got into technology, or IT specifically, back in about 2000, you had three options, right? You got your MCSE, you got your Nobel certification, or you got your Cisco certification. And that was it, right? Whether you worked for the military, or whether you worked for a hospital, or whether you worked for an education system, or a real estate company, or whatever else, they all used that same technology. It was really easy. It was really easy. Which one do you want to learn? One of the big problems we get into in the modern world is there's just 1,000 options. There are 1,000 options to do any damn thing. Hey, you want to put up an About Me webpage? There's 50 ways to do it, right? Back in the day, it used to be IIS or Apache, done. Now there's a gazillion ways to do things. Anyways, so when you're dealing with Python, so Python is a programming language that we use it here. It's our default standard because it does a lot of cool stuff that I care about. With Python, you are able to create web applications. When you think about a web application, basically all a web application is a web page with some functionality attached, right? So you can create just a basic web page. So with this is a web page, and this is active, and this is live, and this is on the internet. If you go to 64.225.14.84, you too can see this amazing web application. Anyways, again, we talk about web applications, you start here and build up. Anywho, so when you're dealing with Python, basically the web app framework is what allows you to turn Python code into a web application. Now, there are a lot of different web app frameworks out there. There's Django, there's Flask, there's Fast API, there's Bottle, there's Pyramid. Is Pyramid anyways, I don't know. There's a whole crap ton of them out there. I really do like Django. I actually really like Django. but damn, Django is complicated. Oh, there is so much to Django. We are going to do Django classes just as soon as I can get my brain around it enough to teach you. I could deploy something in Django. That doesn't mean I can teach it to you, right? That's the issue that we run into. So anyways, basically when you're going to be creating a web app with Python, you're going to use a web app framework. And we use Bottle because it is dirt simple. Doesn't really come with anything. So again, Django is basically a kitchen sink type thing. When you use it, it comes with a database, it comes with a web server, it comes with something called ORM, comes with a whole bunch of stuff in that package, which makes it really powerful, but also has a pretty steep learning curve. What I like about Bottle is it comes with nothing, damn near nothing, but it means that the learning curve is pretty damn simple. Again, basically, WAP, right? That is an actual, again, web app. It's a web app that says hello world, but you can just do that and go with it. But then one of the things to understand with this is that any of these web app frameworks are basically going to use the same process, more or less, for deploying them into the real world. Right, so you can run these scripts on your local computer and you can interact with them as a web app and get all the functionality. But if you're actually going to deploy them up onto the internet or even into your internal environment for people to use them, right, more people than you to use it, you're going to have to go through a number of steps. And so what I'm showing you today, the same, but maybe slightly different with whatever it is that you're going to be doing. It's basically going to be the same processes. So if you use Django or Flask or whatever else, more or less, use ChatGPT, do some searching, but it should also all basically be the same. We take a look at the code that we're basically going to be using today. This is what the code is going to look like. So again, I'm now doing these in MD files. MD files are called markdown files. They're supposed to be the open way of doing documentation. I don't know. Again, this is all beta. I'm doing a test. So if you're like, what is this? This is a markdown file. We'll see how it goes. Basically, with the code that we're going to be looking at today, this is a very, very, very basic web app. So if you've been running Bottle up until this point in time, you should basically understand what's going on. So from the Bottle module, you're going to import route, run, and default app. Now, there's a little bit of difference here, right? So again, if you're going to be running something on your local computer, it's going to be different than if you're actually going to put it into a production environment. So at route for the root, so basically if somebody just plugs in 127.0.0.1 or whatever your domain name or whatever else is, what are they going to get? We're going to get a return of simply hello world. So for this, it just simply says hello world and literally prints out on the screen, hello world. That's it. No HTML, no fancy shit. Just hello world. Then we're going to come down here, and these lines of code are going to be different. So if you've been learning Bottle up until this point, these are slightly different. So if name equals main, do this. So this is an important thing. This is an important thing. If you screw this one up, it can be painful. So basically, you're going to be using something called Gunicorn. I'll talk about this in a second. We're going to be using Gunicorn to run this script. So normally, we run this script and we just run this script. So we hit the go button, or I do Python 3 and run the script, and we do the script. Right. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using Gunicorn. Gunicorn is a Python web server that's actually for production. We're going to be using Gunicorn to run the script. But the problem is when Gunicorn runs a script, if run is over here where we normally put it, Gunicorn is going to try to run the script. And when Gunicorn runs a script, the script itself is then going to try to run, and you get some really weird error logs. You just get this looping garbage of an error log, right? Because Gunicorn is trying to run the script, but by trying to run the script, it then runs the script within the script that it's trying to run, and it kind of it does function, sort of. You're just going to get a whole bunch of errors. So anyways, what this says is if name, so basically name is a built-in variable name for Python. So what it's going to say is if name is main. And so what main is, basically this says that you are running the script on its own. You have called the script on its own. So I put in Python 3, script name, the name is main. I hit the run button up there, the name is main. I use Gunicorn to trigger it, name is not main, because I'm calling this script from outside. So is the script running on its own, or is the script being called from outside? If it's running on its own, host equals 0.0.0.0, so basically run off of any IP address that's on the computer, 127.0.0.1, whatever the actual IP address is, so on and so forth, and do it at port 8080, right? If you're running it from somewhere else, again from Gunicorn, it's an if statement, so you're just not going to do that. Then down here we have my app equals a default app. So this is going to be a new function that we're using, and this basically gives us an app name. So when you use what's going to be called WSGI web servers, so again that's what Gunicorn is a WSGI web server, and one of the things you have to feed it is you have to feed it the script name, and then you have to feed it the app name. And so this is where we get the app name from. So basically we package all this up as this particular app name, so that when we call this, we're going to use script name, colon, app name, and that is what is going to fire this off. So this is going to be some new stuff that you have not seen before. And again, if you do not put that in there, you're going to get some interesting things. When you want to run a script with Gunicorn, so Gunicorn is its own external web server, again, something called a WSGI web server. Again, you can run the script, so from where you're at, right? So basically, from where you're at, you go into the command line, you go to the folder, wherever your script is, and then what you can do is you can run the command Gunicorn, and you're going to give it workers. Right? So what workers is, and why we're going to be using Gunicorn, is Gunicorn is called a multi-threaded web server. So when you use the web server that's built into Python, so when you're using Bottle or Django or anything else and you're using the built-in web server, one of the problems with it is that it's single-threaded. Basically, you can only do one thing at a time. Again, if it was just you and you're doing some ping commands or whatever the hell else, who the hell cares? It's not going to matter, right? Run the action, wait for the action to end, send back the response, run the action, right back and forth. Right, once you start dealing with lots of people, though, once you start dealing with multiple people, you want a multi-threaded environment. What a multi-threaded environment is basically where it can do multiple things at once. So one user is trying to do something, and another user is trying to do something, and another user is trying to do something, and another user is trying to do something, and 4 people can basically be doing something at the same time, and then it's able to rotate through the process. And so that's what you get with Gunicorn and something called workers. So you do a hyphen workers, and then you tell it how many workers you want, basically how many threads that you want. The standard default is 4. You can go and you can do a Google search and you can research how many workers you should have. It's up to you. Look at your own performance reports. Basically, if you have too few workers and you have too many users coming to your site, everything's going to get backed up because there's not enough open processes for them to be able to use. Apparently, if you use way too many workers, basically each one of those workers use hardware resources in order to do what they're doing, and so then your computer will slow down because all the resources are being used for these workers, whether or not they're actually functioning. And so basically, there's this whole thing about how many workers you're supposed to use. And again, for your production environment, figure it the hell out. Again, if you're dealing with a decent little website, if you're dealing with an internal app, that type of thing, the default standard seems to be 4 workers. So start with that. You then do hyphen bind, so this is what you're going to be binding to, and this is the IP address that you're going to be binding to, just like the run up there. So basically, what is Gunicorn going to respond off of? Will respond off of 127.0.0.1. Will respond to a particular IP address that has been configured for the computer, that whole thing. If you do 0.0.0, basically it means it's just going to respond to any IP address that's configured for the computer, and you're going to do it at port 8000. Now this is going to be in the same folder as that script. So the script is myapp.py. Myapp.py, so you're going to say myapp.py, and then actually right there, that should be myapp. Anyways, and then the name here. So myapp.py, we remove the py, and then we have the app name. So script name, app name, don't put the py in there, and that's how this is triggered. So basically if we go to a command line, that's the wrong command line, That's so many command lines. So we got the command line, right? So we got ls-l, and we can see here I've got my app.py here. Basically, I can have the command I already put in before, Gunicorn -- workers for -- bind 0.0.0:8000 my app. So it's my app is the script name and my app is the app name. Those can be different. Basically, I run that. When I run that, I'm now going to be getting this kind of thing. And again, if you don't deal with that run thing properly, you're going to get some weird stuff coming up here. But anyways, I can now go over to my page 127.0.0.1:8000, and I can say hello world, and then --75. Now this is one thing that you might want to think about putting into your scripts, especially when you're testing stuff, is I've talked about this before, the issue with caching mechanisms. Caching is awesome! Until it's not, right? So what a caching mechanism is basically where your system, or some system down the line, makes a request, gets the response back, and then saves that response for later. So instead of going and doing the whole loop in the future, you can just go to the cache. So one of the things, especially when you're testing, making sure your web app actually works, is by putting in some kind of dynamic information on the page, you verify that it's actually updating properly. It didn't provide you a response once, and now you've just been getting it cached for the past 100 times, and like the server is like, having a brain fart. So basically this is just a random number here. So if I do refresh, I do not care what that number is. All I care is every time I hit the refresh button, I'm getting a different answer. That's giving me a dynamic response, just so I can make sure that that's working. Basically all that is putting a rand int in there. So I do number, so number equals rand int, between 0 to 100, and then I do an f string saying hello world with that number, and that's what gives me that refresh there. So this is all there is as far as Gunicorn is concerned. Where the hell am I at? I'm getting lost. I'm getting so lost. I'm so lost. Okay, does anybody have any questions up until this point? Any hands? No hands. Okay. Now let's talk about the tech stack. So again, this is one of the big things whenever you're building stuff is that it's a stack. Again, remember in the technology world, this is all easy. This is all easy. Don't let the real tech professionals hear me say that. But as I say to new people, everything here is easy. TCP/IP is easy. Linux is easy. Python is pretty easy. Bottle's easy. Gunicorn's easy. Take all those easy things and put them into a stack, and that's when everything goes down. So it's important to understand how the stack works, so you can start trying to figure out the simple things that you're supposed to understand in order to make the stack work. All right, so the first thing is going to be DNS, right? So you're going to have like my app. So myapp.com. So somebody goes to their computer and they click in myapp.com. What happens next? Basically what's going to happen is there's something that's what's going to happen is something called DNS, domain name services. What this does is it resolves a domain name to an IP address. So 208.66.55.4. This is what the computers actually care about. The thing is, we're humans. We're not going to remember that. And so that's why we come up with a human readable name. So the first thing is you do a DNS, and that's going to resolve to this. This is where you go to GoDaddy, Cloudflare, whatever. You buy a domain name for $10 or $50 a year or whatever it is now, and basically what you're going to put into that DNS setting is you're going to put in whatever the domain name is and then the server that you're going to be going to. Now with this, again, especially since you're building your own web app, you can point this to basically any IP address that you own or that you control. So like with me, we've got I've got this thing running on Ubuntu or DigitalOcean right now. And so basically for $6 a month, I'm using a droplet over at DigitalOcean, and they give me an IP address of 64.225.14.84. So if I could buy my app, anyways, whatever domain name I could buy, basically I would point it to that IP address. So when somebody goes from there, it will then go to my server. Once that happens, right, basically, you're going to get routed to a box somewhere. And again, this box could be an instance, again, a virtual private server. It could be a physical box that's sitting in your server room. Somehow, basically, the traffic is going to have to get to that box. And that's where, again, we talk about the tech stack. If you have this running locally, you might have to do things like port forwarding on your router. That's a class for another day. Basically, though, what needs to happen is people have to be able to come to your server at the particular port. So what we really want at the end of the day is port 80. So we talked about TCP ports before, transmission control protocol ports. Within TCP/IP, you have IP addresses. And then beyond the IP address, you have a port. And that port is used for what protocol you're using. Port 22 is for SSH. Port 443 is for SSL. Importantly for us, port 80 is for HTTP. When you go to a website such as CNN.com, the default is port 80, and so you don't have to put it in. You simply put in CNN.com and you get dropped onto their webpage. If you want to go to a webpage at a different port, then you have to do whatever that port is. So colon, let's say 8000. And again, that's where if we take a look, at my thing here, if you can see it, 1.7.0.0.1:8000. The reason that I have to do that is because Gunicorn is providing this particular web page at 8000. But that's ugly. That's a pain in the ass. I don't want to deal with port 8000. I want to deal with port 80. And so basically what's going to happen is you're going to be sent to your computer. When you hit your computer, you are then going to have your OS. You're going to have your operating system. It's going to be Linux. It's going to be Ubuntu, Arch, Mint, Red Hat, Fedora, CentOS, whatever else. Or God help you, it's going to be Windows. Hopefully it's not Windows. Anyways, you are going to have to understand how that operating system works, especially from a server perspective. The main thing that you're going to be looking for here is that you understand how security works on that particular operating system. So in the Linux world, we're going to be using CHOWN, so for change owner, or to change permissions. But basically you really have to understand how the permission structure works on the damn server. Again, class on its own. When on OS, you're then going to be installing something called NGINX. NGINX is a web server. So basically, if you want to host CNN.com or whatever web page onto your server, you could use NGINX. You will have heard of Apache. Again, there's NGINX. In the Windows world, there was IIS. I don't know if it still exists anymore. Basically, these are web servers. Normally what happens in the web server is you have a folder. In that folder is something like index.html, and you come to NGINX, and it will provide you with whatever the hell is on index.html. But what we're doing now is we're not actually using NGINX simply as a web server. We're using it as a reverse proxy server. And so what a reverse proxy server does is when somebody comes to myapp.com, goes to the IP address, comes to the server, comes to NGINX, basically NGINX is then going to route where the traffic should go. Oh, you're looking for myapp.com. Where is that going to go? And the cool thing with this is it can be on your box. So that's what we have running here. It's actually on the box. Or it could be on an entirely different box. That's when something called the power of the reverse proxy server. There's a whole bunch of configurations and things that you can do there. But you could actually have multiple web frameworks that are running. They can be doing synchronization and things. And then NGINX can literally route traffic based off of current conditions, that type of thing. It's called reverse proxy server. But today, we are not going into that mess. We are just going to simply keep it on our server. And so from here, this is where we're going to go to Gunicorn. So Gunicorn is the Python web server. It basically presents Python webs as web apps. And so NGINX, when you come to this, is going to go, and it's going to go to Gunicorn. Now, one of the things with Gunicorn is that it actually has to be running. Again, remember with all this kind of stuff, nothing happens magically. Nothing happens magically at all. You have to configure it. So one of the things you have to make sure is that you actually turn Gunicorn into a service. And we'll go into that a little bit later. And basically all it means when you turn it into a service and you enable it is that it starts when the server starts running. So you turn the server on and Gunicorn is up and NGINX is up. And so everything gets routed to Gunicorn. If you don't turn Gunicorn into a service, you either have to manually start it, which you don't want to do, or the communication will simply fail out because it doesn't exist, because you're forwarding it down. Basically, when Gunicorn runs as a service, basically it's going to be triggering your bottle app that you created. So my little hello world, right? When Gunicorn starts, as I showed you, it is going to be starting that particular app, and that particular app is going to be written in Python. So again, a relatively very simple thing that we've created, and this is what the tech stack looks like. All these things are dirt simple. Tying them all together is what turns into a colossal pain in the ass. Let's see here. Prerequisites for when you're going to be setting all of this up. So one of the things you need to be thinking about is security. Again, we just did a cybersecurity class for programmers. One of the things you need to be thinking about is security. And basically, one of the things you have to understand is that your system, hackers are going to come after it. Hackers are going to try to attack your system. So one of the things that you want to do is you want to decrease the plane of vulnerability, basically how easy it is to attack your system. So when you run Gunicorn, which is basically running your web app, what are you not going to do? Ever. You are never going to run this as root. Because if somebody can compromise your web app, they then have the privileges of root on your entire server, and everything is going to go to hell. So one of the first things that you may want to do is you may want to create a user such as www, right? So there's some reserved users, www-data, other users, basically try to plug it in, it's already being used, find something else. I would argue for services like this, you just find a name that you like, that's a nice, good service name that you're going to remember. We're going to go through this. There's going to be a lot of configurations. There's going to be a lot of shit to remember. Make it simple. Make it simple and do it on every damn box that you use. Anyways, so one of the first things you may want to do is sudo add user and whatever you want your web user to be, right? And so that web user, it's going to be its own individual user. Its only purpose in all the world is to basically run Gunicorn. So one of the nice parts with it is you can lock it down, so it can only do whatever Gunicorn is supposed to do, or you can give specific rights to it. So again, it can only do what the hell it's supposed to do and nothing else. Past that, we're going to go into it. Sudo apt install NGINX. So basically, if you're sitting down at a Linux box, so with this, we're going to assume you're at a Linux box, you're using DigitalOcean or something like that. If you're using another system, God help you. That is one thing that I'm going to tell you. Again, people ask like what computer you should get if you want to learn programming. Honestly, Linux is really good. Ubuntu is great. The main thing with Linux is that you can actually run a lot of stuff on your system really easily. Beyond that, Mac, many of us use Mac, and then, there's the poor schlubs that gotta use Windows. One of the things you need to be thinking about with this is, again, how you're actually going to be installing and configuring things. That's one of the things like with Windows. So about a year or so ago, I was going to start doing more stuff with Windows, with Python. And one of the issues with things like device drivers and configurations, it was just a mess. So anyways, Ubuntu is really nice. Sudo apt install NGINX. So basically this is how you install the web server onto your system. You hit yes, you install it. Now, from wherever you're at, you're going to need to make a directory for your app, right? Whatever the app name is, you're going to make a directory for it. So if you're in the home folder for the www user, you would then do make directory mkdir my app, and that will create a folder there, right? Then you're going to change directory to go in there. This can be done either before or else. After sudo apt install python3-venv. So I actually haven't done a class on venv yet, at least with Silicon Dojo. There is a class on YouTube about it. This is for virtual environments. Basically, this is going to be very important for packaging apps to go somewhere else. Right, so if you're just creating an app for your own little computer, it doesn't matter. One of the issues that you're going to run into, though, especially if you're creating apps, they're going to be shipping off to somewhere else, is making sure you actually document things like all the modules that you use. Right, so if I install a package for this project over here, and then I'm creating this project over here, and I'm writing it all out, and then I forget that I already installed the module previously and now I'm using it here. One of the issues you can run into is you can kind of get confused about what modules your package actually, or your app actually needs. So what a venv does, what a virtual environment does, is it allows you to install all of the modules into one environment for your app. So when this app runs, it only uses the modules that you've installed for that particular environment. When this app runs, it'll use the modules that have installed for a different environment. And the nice part with this too is that it all saves that as basically in a file and folder structure, so you can copy and paste this whole mess. And you don't have to go into a big rigmarole. So we're going to be using a virtual environment. The other thing too is that I'll tell you is when you go to deploy to DigitalOcean or whatever else, there's a lot of documentation out there. There's a lot of great documentation out there that all defaults to you using a venv, a virtual environment. You can make things run without a virtual environment. They don't necessarily give you the documentation for how to do that, though. So again, one of the things you're going to learn in the technology world, again, this whole idea of the best way to do stuff. I'm going to tell you, I do a lot of things because it's been frickin' documented. What can I use that has support? And I'm going to use that, so virtual environments. Once you've installed a virtual environment from the directory that you're in, you're going to do python3-m venv, and then whatever the venv name is. So this is going to create a folder with a structure underneath for that virtual environment. Now for me, I normally call my venvs venv because it makes life easier, because again, you got to remember this for when you put it into configurations. If every single venv that you make has a different name, have fun with that. I just call it venv. Source. So basically, once you've created a virtual environment, you're going to do what's called source, the virtual environment name, so venv, bin activate. And this is going to activate your virtual environment. Let's go back here. Oh, Control C. Is it exit? No. Give me another tab. Tab with Pro. Okay, so basically I'm here just so you understand how this virtual environment works. ls-l. Okay, so I'm in the www directory here. I have my myapp.py here, and I have this virtual environment here, right? If I cd into venv, and do ls, basically you start to see that there's a folder structure under there. Don't really worry about it too much right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to do source, source venv, because that's the name of the virtual environment, bin/activate. And so one of the big things, again, whenever you're using computers, command line, is always take a look at what this prompt looks like. This is gonna matter a lot. So right now, this is what my prompt looks like. And now this, you see I have venv here. Basically what this now means is that I'm running in this virtual environment. So if I try to run the script previously, when I'm outside the virtual environment, the packages, the modules are not installed, so it should fail. Again, this computer, I'm not sure because I have a whole bunch of crap on it. But basically, now that I'm in the virtual environment, I can then run my script. And if I do something like the pip list, basically this is going to tell me the modules that are installed into this particular virtual environment. So bottle, Gunicorn, pip, right? So those are basically the modules that we're going to be using today. And so this is what you want in your venv. Okay, so again. For this, again, we're going to have to install bottle. So Python 3-m pip install bottle, Python 3-m pip install Gunicorn. Bottle is for the web app framework. Gunicorn is for the web server. Now you can install Gunicorn onto your computer. All right, there's like apt sudo apt install Gunicorn. There's some command in order to do that. Basically, by installing it just within as a pip package, though, it kind of keeps it contained a little bit more, so that hopefully you don't have security issues, security leaks, that type of deal. So if you do it this way, Gunicorn will only be usable from within that virtual environment. If you do it for system-wide, then it's available for the entire system. Whether that matters to you, who the hell knows. Okay, so let's see here. So this is the script, so my -app.py, and again this is the hello world, this is the if name equals main, this is what we're going to run, then we're going to create the app name. Let's see here, then we're going to create a service. So the service is going to be, this is what's going to start up when the computer starts. Jock! Jock comes, Jock goes. How many Jocks are there? How many Jocks are there in the world? There's 2 Jocks apparently. Anyways, so basically, again, we're looking at a stack. Okay, so we got Python. Python's done. We've got the virtual environment, all of that kind of stuff. Bottle app. We created the hello world bottle app, and so now we've got to get to that Gunicorn component. Again, we got to get to that service component. And so basically what this is going to be it's going to do sudo nano. So whenever you're using Linux at the command line, you have to find some kind of text editor. There's a whole bunch of them. My God, there's so many text editors. And I'm just going to let you argue about which text editor you want to use. If you want to use Emacs, you go, girl. If you want to use Vim or V or whatever else, fine. I like nano. Nano is just dirt damn simple. Anyways, so you say sudo nano /etc/systemmd system app name, whatever the name is that you want to be, .service, right? So basically what this is doing is this is creating a service for your app, or for Gunicorn. Basically when the computer starts, this is a service that will start up for you. Now there's 2 ways in order to create the service. You can either create the service with an IP address, so 127.0.0.1:8000, or as a socket. So basically, how do we put this? Get rid of this for a second. So there's 2 ways to do the service. So NGINX is going to have to connect to the service somehow. By hook or by crook, it's going to have to get there. Right? So basically you have Gunicorn, you're creating the service, and there's 2 ways in order to do it. Right? Basically one way is to run Gunicorn locally at 127.0.0.1 colon HTTP port you want to use. Right? So NGINX, when somebody comes in, NGINX will simply redirect to this that's running because it's a service, and life is pretty easy. Right? The good part about using the IP address here is you don't have a lot of security issues. You don't have a lot of privilege issues, you don't have security issues, you don't have a lot of troubleshooting problems. You just set Gunicorn up to run for 127.0.0.1 or whatever else, and you wash your hands with it. Theoretically, there can be some security issues there, because basically what's happening is if somebody can get to that IP address, if you misconfigure how that IP address is, let's say 0.0.0, or you do something else, theoretically somebody else could get in, and basically instead of going to NGINX, they could bypass NGINX to get there to where Gunicorn is actually delivering the web app, and theoretically they might be able to do something. But what are they going to do? I'm not really quite sure, but theoretically they could do something. So that is considered not necessarily the most secure way. It's the most scalable way, basically because NGINX can point to different servers or such, maybe not the most secure. So one of the things you can do is a socket. So basically, I won't go over the configurations in a bit, what happens is when Gunicorn boots up, it actually creates a file, so myapp.sock. And so this .sock is not really accessible from the outside world regardless. And so NGINX, when people come in, it gets pointed to this .sock file. The issue with that is you have to understand how Linux permissions and privileges and all that kind of crap works because Gunicorn is going to have permissions to actually be able to create this particular file, and NGINX is going to have the proper permissions to actually be able to access that particular file in order for everything to work properly. If any of these configurations are wrong, it makes you sad and you want to cry. So again, if you're starting out, I would say do the 1.7.0.0.1, basically do the network configuration. It will make life easier. Jock. Which Jock is it? Jock, what's up?
Thanks. I switched from my phone to my computer.
Yep.
So I'm still trying to wrap my head around, you explained it a couple times, but what exactly Gunicorn is? Is it a service that serves on your server, or it's not a framework like Bottle and things? So I'm still trying to figure out what exactly is Gunicorn per se. Is it just to help the server be able to find the websites easier, or the IP address? So that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around, like what exactly Gunicorn is. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Yeah, so Gunicorn is something called a WSGI web server. So basically, again, when you initially install Python, there's actually a default web server that's built in. That's really crappy. So you can actually just write Python code and present it to an IP address and use it as a web service or something. Basically what Gunicorn is professionals sat down to harden it, make sure it's multi-threaded, do a whole bunch of this kind of thing. And basically, so what Gunicorn allows you to do is it allows you to turn your Bottle app or Flask or Django basically into that web app. It's what is presenting your Python script as a web application for users to come in. NGINX, that's sitting up here, that is, again, that reverse proxy server. So that helps with things like traffic and load balancing and just making sure that the process works better. So theoretically, you could just use Gunicorn. You could just have your Bottle, and you could just use Gunicorn, and you could just point people from the outside world directly to Gunicorn. And again, to some degree that would work, but then there'd be security issues and reliability issues and some other things.
Can Gunicorn work with something other than Python? Or it only works with Python?
Just Gunicorn work with something other, but I don't know. You use it with Python. It's a Python web server, right? I don't know if you can use it with JavaScript. I know you use it with Python.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Gunicorn is a Python WSGI HTTP server for Unix. It is a pre-fork worker model ported from the Ruby Unicorn project. Gunicorn server is broadly compatible with other web servers. There you go. That's the technical documentation. Yeah, and again, like I said, with a lot of this stuff, that's a big thing in the tech world, is sometimes the stuff has to just digest. And that's one of the reasons too, like with a lot of people that want to get into tech, they have this thing where they're like, Eli, I'm going to study 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I'm going to be Bill Gates in 6 months or whatever. And it's just like, no, you're not. Because it takes a while to digest. When I was doing martial arts, one of my instructors was teaching this defense series. Anyways, it was like a defense series, and it was like 4 weekends. So it was 2 days each. It was really, really cool. All kinds of wacky real-world situations. But one of the things I asked him, because he would only do it once a month. So you do 2 weeks this month, and 2 weeks the next month, and 2 weeks the next month, whatever else. And again, I'm one of those people, I was a lot younger at the time. So I was like, hey, can we make this more accelerated? Can we do this faster? One of the interesting things, again, even in the martial arts world, he said, Eli, I tried to do that before. We used to do like 1 week boot camps and this kind of thing. And he said, what I found is that people just didn't retain it for whatever reason. He was like, in order to retain this stuff, he was like, I train you for 2 days, and then you go the hell away for 4 weeks. And something in that process, it allows you to digest the information. So that when you do the next 2 days, you're actually better, and then you go away for 4 weeks, and the next 2 days, the next 2 days. That actually trying to lump it all together in 5 days was actually an inferior way of trying to actually make somebody, be able to do this stuff in a useful fashion. So that's one thing too, like when you're learning this kind of stuff, and it seems confusing as hell, it's okay. Don't worry, we're going to keep using it. It's going to keep coming back again and again and again and again. And at some point, you're like, now I get it. Or you'll become a florist. That's up to you. Anyways, so this is going to be, myapp.service. So when you create this file, so basically doing nano etc systemd blah blah blah. So if this file already exists, you will access it. So if this is already here, then you'll see something and you can edit it. If it doesn't exist, it will create it. One of the nice things with nano. So we come here, and this is where you do not fat finger. Make sure you do it right. So you have it up here in brackets, unit. So you have a description for what this particular service is. So this particular service is my cool app. Again, you do things like that so people know what the hell you're doing. After equals network.target. So this is actually a very useful thing. So basically what this means is when the computer is booting, the service will start after your network starts. So you can run into some weird troubleshooting problems where basically when a service tries to start, I think it's 3 times in Linux, if a service tries to start and fails, it gets 3 restarts and then Linux kills it, right? So if you try to start this service, Gunicorn, before your network is started, it's going to fail 3 times in repetition and then it's not going to work. So basically what this says is do not start this service until the network service has already started. Once you get an IP address, go for it. Then we're going to go to the service itself. So user equals whatever the username for that web app user that you created. www, web user, whatever the hell else. It doesn't matter what that name is, as long as it matches whatever name you created before. Add user blah, you put that blah here. User equals blah. Group equals www-data. So www-data as a group, that is just basically the web user group. That's default created within Linux, and so that is going to the group. So again, when we start talking about permissions, 777, all the kinds of permissions. We're not going to get into that today, but you have permissions for the owner, for the group, and then for everybody. And so the owner is this owner, the group is this. Working directory. So basically, where is this app located? So again, how I have this set up, in Linux, the user profiles are saved in home. So you go to home, whatever your username is, and then whatever the app folder is. That is a working directory. So if you simply put that app folder all the way at root, it would just be /app folder. Right. The environment. So this is for that venv. And again, this will screw you up if you're not using virtual environments. Basically, again, the modules and all that kind of stuff, the environment that you're going to be using. Environment equals, and this is weird. Again, don't ask me why. I'm sure there's a reason. You'll notice this has no quotation marks. You'll notice this has no quotation marks. This has a quotation mark. Why? Because it does. Environment equals path equals home. Again, that username, the app name, the venv name. So again, how we have it now, home, let's say www, my app, venv, bin. Right, that's going to be the environment, and then you close those double quotation marks. Then what is the start going to be? So how are we going to be starting everything? So exec start equals home, username, app name, venv name, bin, Gunicorn, right? So we've installed Gunicorn in that virtual environment. So this is how we're triggering Gunicorn. Then we're going to do -- workers. We're going to use 4 workers. Just so you can see, this is just simply word wrap here. Don't get all lost in word wrap, right? So basically, workers 4, we're going to bind it to 127.0.0.1:8000, the script name, so my app, the app name that we set before, so my app or whatever it is, and that is what's going to trigger Gunicorn. Down we have here for install, one to buy, so it's multi-user, so there's going to be multiple users that are going to be getting the service, and this is basically what you have to create for this service to run. So the 127.0.0.1, again, from a security standpoint, this is interesting. So if you're running your own, right, you have Ubuntu. You have an Ubuntu desktop here, and you have a GUI environment on your Ubuntu desktop. Once this is running, you can go to Firefox or whatever. You can type in 127.0.0.1:8000, and your web app will show up. So that's one of the ways that you can test to make sure this service in Gunicorn is working properly. The weird part is if you just simply have a command line, right? If you're just simply using server, basically a Ubuntu server, obviously you don't have a GUI and you don't have Firefox and all that kind of stuff, so it can be a little harder to troubleshoot. So one of the things that I would say with you folks, especially in the beginning, when you're beginning to learn all of this stuff, when you're not comfortable, when you're not confident with it, have a Linux computer, have an Ubuntu computer with Ubuntu desktop on it. So it's very easy for you to go through and troubleshoot things and deal with things in that graphical user interface environment before you have to dive in the deep end of only having a command line. So once you've done that, you're going to hit Control X, you're going to save, so that actually saves a file. Make sure to save the file. If you don't save the file, That's going to be the other thing, is do make sure when you run this as sudo. What the hell? Make sure you run this as sudo. So super user do, basically this escalates you to those root privileges, and that allows you to do stuff like this, allows you to modify these types of files. If you don't use sudo, if you just do nano, blah, 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 you may get to the end of this, you go to save it, and you don't have permission to save it, and then that's its own misery. So do make sure to use sudo. Once you've done that, you're going to run sudo systemctl daemon reload. So what this is going to do is it's going to reload all of the services within that service directory. If you don't do that, you can't do the rest of it. But don't worry, if you try to do the rest of it and you haven't done it, it'll give you a warning. Then what you're going to do is you're going to say sudo systemctl start the app name. Right? So basically this is how you're going to start the service for what you've created for Gunicorn to actually make sure that it's running. Once you've started it, you do the start. Hopefully nothing fails out. Then the next thing that you do is you do sudo systemctl enable and whatever that is, right? So basically what this is doing is it's saying start this service when the computer reboots. So if all you do is start it now, as soon as the computer reboots, it'll be off because you haven't configured it to auto start, and then you got to go through figuring out how to start it. If you do enable, basically what it says is every time the computer reboots, make sure to run that particular service. Again, if you have a web browser, on your system, you should be able to go to 127.0.0.1:8000 in the web browser and be able to see and make sure what's going on. One of the other things you can do here for troubleshooting purposes is you can do sudo systemctl status, the app name that you created, and that will show you the status to make sure everything is running properly, right? So if you went through here and you fat-fingered something, you go to start, maybe you don't get an error for some reason, you go to status, you might see that it'll actually give you, it'll say, you know, it failed, and it might actually give you some reason on why it failed. So status is something, should put that in here. Okay, so then we get to NGINX. I thought I modified this file. Anyways, so for NGINX. So NGINX is already installed. This is our reverse proxy server, right? So you want to do sudo nano /etc/nginx/sites-available, and you go to default. So it's interesting. If you look at the documentation for doing this, a lot of the documentation tells you to create a new site. So a new site for my app. The problem is if the default is there and it's configured, you can run into some weird problems when you're trying to go to root. It doesn't necessarily route properly. So especially if all you're going to have, you're just going to have one web app, basically one whatever on your server, I would say you just simply modify it as default. When you go in there, you basically going to delete everything. When you look at the default configuration, it's going to give you a whole bunch of information. You don't really care about any of it, get rid of it. And this is what you're going to put in there. So what you're going to say is server. So you're going to say listen at port 80, right? So we talk about those TCP ports. So Gunicorn is running at port 8000. if I try to connect to port 8000, I have to do colon 8000. That doesn't work. I want it to be default, so we're going to say listen at port 80. So I simply put in crappy app, and it goes in. And this is the default server. Server name is going to be for 127.0.0.1, so that's local. Location. So this is basically where you're going to be routing to. So if somebody comes to this location, so this location is the root directory. Again, basically coming directly to your IP address for the root. Proxy pass, HTTP, again, 127.0.0.1, colon 8000. So this is where it's going to pass from NGINX to that Gunicorn service that you've created. You have a whole bunch of stuff in here with a proxy set header, and it's remote address and that kind of stuff. And basically you need this for that whole reverse proxy server for it to work properly. Essentially a copy paste. Anyways. And that's basically all there is there. So we create the service, so the Gunicorn is running, and then we come down here and then we point NGINX at Gunicorn. Then in order to verify that you didn't screw up something with the Gunicorn to make sure you didn't screw up something with the NGINX configuration, you do sudo NGINX space -t, and what this is going to do is going to look at that configuration file, and it's going to see if there was any problems with that configuration file. If it is, it'll try to spit out what problems it has. Then what you're going to do is you're going to do sudo systemctl restart the service for NGINX. So just like we restarted the service for our app, we're going to restart the service for NGINX. This is a big thing in the Linux world, and this is one of the things that screws people up the most, is forgetting to restart services. So more or less how Linux works is when a service starts, it looks at the configuration file, it brings in all the information from the configuration file, and then it runs it from memory. Well, here's the thing. If it's running it from memory, and you change the configuration file, what do you think is going to happen? Nothing. Nothing, because it's running it from memory. So whenever you make any change in the Linux world, make sure to restart all relevant services. So basically when you restart the services, it will pull in those new configurations, and then away you go. That's the biggest thing for noobs. The reason noobs lose so much of their hair is because they do all these configuration changes and then it doesn't work. And they do more configuration changes and it doesn't work. They're like, what am I doing wrong? It's like, restart the service. Restart. You actually did it right the first time. Hey, 5 hours ago when you did it, yeah, that was the right way. You just didn't restart the damn service. So there's one thing to remember today, restart the damn service. Okay, and with that, it should be working. So if you go to, not that, this one, 64.225.14.84. So imagine if I had a domain name, I just didn't bother with the domain name with this. So mycrappyapp.com goes to that IP address. Once I hit that IP address, that goes to NGINX because I'm at port 80. It hits NGINX. NGINX is the reverse proxy server, so it then sends me to Gunicorn at port 8000. Gunicorn is running the app that I've created, and this is the web app that I get. And that's basically what there is in order to deploy a bottle app. The other thing that you can do is something called a socket. We talked about that before, and I have this at the end. Once you can deploy a bottle app using 127.0.0.1, then bother with sockets, because sockets are its thing. Oops, Jock. Other people can ask questions too. I'm just going to put this on the table. Jock isn't the only one with a hand, I think. What's up, Jock?
So I remember a long time ago you said we could never use port 80. How are we able to use it now? Do you understand the question yet?
Yeah, because that's literally what NGINX or Apache does. When you install either NGINX or Apache or let's say IIS or whatever, they are built to provide websites at port 80, and so they have the permission to use port 80. So basically that's it. Like when you install it with admin privileges. When you install with admin privileges, I don't know, a whole bunch of configurations change on the back end, and so either NGINX or Apache are able to use port 80 and you don't have to worry about it.
So the easier, so which one is easy? Like before you showed us how to do 80/80, and now you're showing, is it using 80 more complicated to just use that because we have to use these other, I guess, systems to do it 80, or the simplest way is just do 80/80? Kind of see the question I'm asking?
Yeah, so basically what's happening here, right? So again, these are all different things that are talking to each other. So NGINX is allowed to use port 80. It's allowed to use port 80, right? Gunicorn, when you run Gunicorn, is not allowed to use port 80. It's considered a protected port. So basically the issue is you want Gunicorn to auto-run, but it's not able to use port 80. So that's where, and you'll see with these ports, so there's other like standard HTTP ports that people use. They're just kind of known. So 8080 is the standard that I learned 20 years ago. I guess nowadays people are also using port 8000. Actually, it doesn't really matter with either port 8080 or 8000. These are not privileged ports. They are not restricted ports. Anybody on the system basically can use them. So when Gunicorn starts running, and they run it under that limited user account of www, right? www does not have permission to use port 80. It can use either 8080 or 8000. So Gunicorn runs your app under those ports because that's a privilege that it's able to do. And then basically NGINX then points to that. So when the user comes from the outside world, they're going to go using port 80. They're going to hit NGINX, and then NGINX routes them. And that's that whole reverse proxy thing that I'm talking about. Routes them to what's going on internally.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and that's where it's all. And again, that's the whole thing. You get into like issues with permissions and things. So like theoretically, you could run Gunicorn on port 80. But here's the thing: in order to run Gunicorn under port 80, you most likely have to have escalated privileges, such as root privilege, admin type privilege, that type of thing. And so if somebody is able to compromise your bottle web app, and that bottle app has escalated privileges, all of a sudden your system gets hacked to high hell, right? So basically NGINX is pretty locked down. Again, I'll always say pretty. It's pretty locked down, right? So anyways, NGINX is pretty locked down. It's able to use port 80. It's, people have been using it for years. It should be fine. So this is able to use port 80. Gunicorn, when you spin this up, it uses these non-privileged ports, so you do not have to have escalated privileges, and that's one of the ways that you keep your system being secure. Because basically that's what you can do, is you can make your app run at port 80. And as long as nobody tries to hack your system, you're fine. Again, we talked about cybersecurity, right? You need a vulnerability, you need a vector, and you need an attacker. You can have a vulnerability and you can have a vector. If nobody attacks it, you're still fine. If somebody does attack it, you're screwed. So yeah, that's why you kind of step through this whole process. That makes sense. So we can do socket. So I'm just going to go and take a look at this for a second. Again, this is his own thing because, well. Again, that's one of the issues with teaching you folks is there's good enough to do something. There's good enough to feel comfortable deploying something. And then there's good enough actually teaching people how to do it as its own deal. So basically with the socket, the nice part about the socket is theoretically it's more secure. So everything is on the same box. NGINX is on the same box. Socket is on the same box. You don't have an IP address for for Gunicorn. So theoretically it's more secure, theoretically. And so this is how you do it with socket. So description, my cool app. So this is a service. So the service that we created before, we're going to create with a socket this time. We're going to start it after the network. We're going to have the user account. So with this, I just put in www for my user account. Group equals www-data. So here's the thing. www and www-data are going to have ownership of your my app folder. Did I have that up here? Yeah. So sudo change ownership, CHOWN, -R for recursive. Recursive means do this to this folder and everything below. Home www. So yeah, for this I did home www. So basically www and everything below. I want the owner to be www group owner be www-data. So they own this folder and everything below it. And hopefully if you do that, it should work. Yeah, hopefully. So anyways, working directory, home www, my app, so my app you had, environment, home www, my app, VENV, bin, so this is getting you into that virtual environment. Then exec start, home www, my app, VENV, bin, Gunicorn. We do -- for workers for, like we did before, but for the bind, I don't know if you can see that on and you guys on Zoom. So bind, -- bind, you're going to do Unix : myapp.sock. So what this is going to do is your working directory is home www myapp. So it's going to put this file called myapp.sock in that folder. So basically, NGINX is going to have to be able to access this file, and that's generally where everything goes down. We then have my app, so this is the script name, and this is the app name installed for multi-user target. So this is what's going to happen here. So Unix : so instead of 0.0.0 or 127.127 or 127.0.0.1 8000, we're going to do myapp.sock. Unix : myapp.sock. Reload, start the service, hopefully it works. Again, verify that the service is working, so sudo systemctl status and what the app name is. Again, it is more likely that this service is going to fail versus the last one that I showed you because you're actually writing to that folder. So if it can't write, the service will fail and you should get some error here if you plug in status. Again, we go to NGINX, sites default, like we did before. And yeah, so here, basically it's a lot like we did before. Listen at port 80, default server name is 127.0.0.1, location is root. And then here you get this weird ass thing. So http:// Unix : home www myapp.sock. So HTTP, but then we're using Unix to go to where that's located. Basically everything else is, I think, the same there. You then verify that the NGINX configurations are working, and then you restart the system. So if we go over here, right? So this is what is actually online, and this is actually using the socket. Yeah. So what we can see here, hopefully you can see on your 1080p screen, right? So home www my app. So you can see my myapp.py. So this is my script here, and under this you can see myapp.sock. So when I start the service, what I want to see is that that's there. If I come here and that file doesn't exist, then nothing the hell else is going to work because it doesn't exist. It has to be there in order to be accessed. Again, we can do sudo systemctl status my app. And again, that's all just one line. Don't get wrong. And then when I do that, basically what you should see is active, running, enabled. You should see green. You should see green. If you see red, have fun troubleshooting. You're going to have to troubleshoot it. God knows what the hell issue is going on there. And so with that, your service is going to need permission to be able to write that file to that folder, and NGINX is going to need to have permission in order to read the file in the folder. And that's going to be the big thing here with changing the ownership up here. By changing the ownership, you're changing the ownership recursively of the www directory. www is the owner, www-data, that's the group owner. So hopefully with that ownership, when you set all this up, it'll work for you. Hopefully. Beyond that, as far as troubleshooting purposes are concerned, again, if you're using Linux, especially Ubuntu, it does have a built-in firewall. Again, I talked about layers of security previously. And the most important thing I want you to take away from that class is if you screw something up and you shut down your own server, you haven't made the world any better. Right? That's one of the big things with like security things. So UFW is the built-in firewall to Linux. Generally, when you spin up a new droplet, UFW is not running. Hopefully. So you shouldn't run into any firewall issues. You shouldn't run into firewall issues. As long as you set all this up right, people go to port 80, they drop in. One of the issues you might get into is if you're using an older server, or especially a server that you've been playing around with, and at some point you configured UFW, all these configurations can be correct. But if your firewall is blocking port 80, it's not going to matter. None of it's going to work, because the firewall is blocking port 80, so we can get to that particular port. So that's one of the things to think about, like with troubleshooting. And the rest of it is just kind of going through and playing. Again, easiest way to set it up is using that 127.0.0.1:8000 for the service. Once you get that under your belt, you can do the socket, and then you got your web app, and it's running. And you too can say, "Hello, Mom. I'm on the web." So that is the class. That is the class. Anybody have any questions? There's no real labs today, because again, you've got to have a Linux box. One way or the other, you have to have a Linux box or DigitalOcean or whatever else. So feel free to ask me about this in the future, like after classes. But yeah, we don't really have, because you gotta have this. Let's see here. Jock, what's up?
So my question is, like, we went over all this today, and the first thing you were saying is like Linux. When Linux will be the best thing, then you have a Mac. I have a Mac computer. Would I be able to run any of this on the Mac?
Yeah, you can run, so Gunicorn. Not that. Oh, where'd I have that? So this right here, this is running on my Mac. So when I run, there we go. So when I run Gunicorn workers 4bind008000 my app, when I run this is completely on my Mac. And I can go over here to 127.0.0.1:8000. And as you can see, it's refreshing. So the Gunicorn part you can run on your Mac. Now, God help you if you really want to do this. You can run NGINX on your Mac. Have fun. You got to go through the whole troubleshooting process on that, and God knows how well that's going to work for you. So you can run NGINX. You can use your Mac as a full web server. Everything I showed you today, you can build that stack. Again, the issue that you run into is then you've got to do all the configurations for the Mac stack. And again, I'm not doing this 20 different times. So yes, so theoretically you can. Again, I would get a Linux computer. That's where, I have these old, this is what I have for Silicon Dojo. So when Silicon Dojo is the in-person experience, when we go back to it, these are our lab computers. 2012 MacBook Pro, bought them for $130 a piece, through in solid state drives. These run Ubuntu like a champ. As long as you're not doing real AI stuff, they're fine. And so you can put Ubuntu desktop on this and build everything and test it, and then you're only paying the $150 or whatever it costs you. Or if you have some computer that's gathering dust somewhere, you can do that too. Or even with DigitalOcean. So again, this is running the Hi Mom. All right, this right here is running on DigitalOcean. And with this, so this is actually on the web, it's active on the web, the whole 9 yards. I'm just paying $6 a month. That's one thing that I will warn you. If you decide to use like DigitalOcean or anybody else, the $4 a month plans suck. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to spend $20 a month. Just don't buy the $4 a month plans. Spend some money. Buy the $6 a month plan. That'll work for you. But again, so you can use this, and again, with that, when you come here, there's this console, and this console is what takes you to this. And so you can I'm actually essentially terminaling in to this virtual Ubuntu box that's up there, paying $6 a month, and yeah.
So, okay, but look at two options: using DigitalOcean to kind of do this lab, or I do have a 2012 MacBook Pro, and I'm making that into my server to try to test this stuff on, in a sense, correct? If I take that old MacBook like you have there and turn it into a server to try to practice this on?
Yeah. So basically, all a server is a computer that provides services to other ones. That's really what all it is at the end of the day. So yeah, if you can install Ubuntu, just go there. There's a lot of it's basically just flash a USB drive and then you can boot it up and you install. So yeah, then you can turn that into an Ubuntu server and do all the project that we did today. Yep.
All right, I'll try that. And if I have any questions, just hit you up on LinkedIn.
Yep, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Ash, what's up?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for all the explanation.
Yep.
And my query is, suppose if I have to host two different websites, then in that condition, I need to have two Ubuntu running on the DigitalOcean, or is there going to be a single one which will redirect to the NGINX sitting on some other box?
Okay, so basically what happens in NGINX, because again, NGINX is also a complicated piece of software. I'm just showing you a little bit. So what happens, whether you're using NGINX or Apache or IIS, if you're in the Windows world, there's something called vhosts. And so basically it's virtual host, but it's not virtual modern stuff. Basically all that is what happens is you have your box, and what you do is you configure for the different domain names that are on your box. So basically you say like myapp.com, and then what's going to happen is you're going to put configurations there to route users to something. Again, either to an index.html or to a web app or whatever else. If you put your app.com, that's a different vhost, and so you can put a different configuration to route to somebody else. And so that's where, like with GoDaddy years ago, they used to have a very, very bad reputation because they would put like 1,000 websites onto one of their shared hosting plans. And that's what happened, is basically you can just replicate this out 1,000 times, and then what happens is myapp.com resolves to the IP address of this server. Your app.com also resolves to the IP address of this server. But when your request comes in, the server is going to ask, what website are you looking for? So even though both these users are going to the same server, one user is going to myapp.com, the other user is going to yourapp.com, and so they'll get routed differently within the system. But God help me, that's another class. So yeah, that's on a technical level, that's how it works though.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like with any of this stuff, whether it's Gunicorn or whether it's NGINX, you can probably do about a 5 to 10 hour class, like literally on any one of these products. Because that's where, like with Apache or NGINX, I actually do want to do a class on them in the future. But again, it's just like when you actually get into it, it's like, there's a lot of stuff there. So, anyways, any more questions? If you don't got any more questions, I'm gonna go. I've got a Halloween party tonight. Woohoo! We're all gonna get together and be dressed up as ghosts, looking out at the desolation that is Asheville. Okay. Any more questions? All right. Fair enough. So again, I will be going to All Things Open this weekend and early next week. If you are in the Raleigh area, it does seem like a good conference if you want to show up. We're going to be doing more classes. I'm going to start putting these up because hopefully the internet is fixed. I had the Comcast or the Spectrum person here. Hopefully it got fixed. I don't know. We'll find out. So hopefully our internet's good. Gonna keep putting out these classes. And again, like I say, we're gonna have the live classes in Asheville and in Raleigh. The one thing that I will request for anybody that's still here that cares, I don't really care if you become a member of the other meetups, but please do not RSVP for an in-person meetup if you're in Kathmandu. Just doesn't help anybody. That's going to be my one request there. But if you are in the area, again, like I say, in Asheville, we're going to start doing the in-person classes, and then Raleigh. And really the big thing with that, and again, the thing for you folks to be thinking about, is there is the value of relationships, right? There's this idea like, everybody says like these truisms, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And that actually doesn't go quite far enough. It's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. The most important conversations that will affect your life forever will be conversations you do not know happened, right? You go to a party, you go to an event, you're talking with somebody about this weird-ass AI project you're working on, they go to talk to somebody, when they're talking to somebody, they're like, crap, we've been trying to actually do that type of thing. Do you think you could get me their number? Right? And that's where the real power in our industry comes from. So that's why we're going to be doing the in-person thing. So those are going to be happening. And we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Let's see. Thanks for the class. Thanks for the class. Thanks. Keep up the work. Good deal. Cool. So that's all I got. I will see you probably next week. We'll do some class next week. See y'all later.